Hello, I'm Colin Green, and you are listening to Spike Pit. At this point, I think it's fair to say that I'm a self-confessed Free League fanboy. My play streak continues. Happily, it continues with Coriolis. I've played Forbidden Lands. I've played Mutant Year Zero. Dragonbane. I've read The One Ring. Played the old version. Not played the Free League version, the second edition yet. I'm just having a great time. I'm loving it. I'm running Mutant Year Zero. All the others I haven't played a lot. Mostly a couple of sessions at most of any of the others. I think Forbidden Lands being the next that I've played the most. But yeah, Coriolis, the latest, played it with Carl Rodriguez, the GMologist himself, and his wife and producer of their YouTube channel, Amy. Total blast. I enjoyed playing with two players. That suits me fine. It's that sort of game where when you've got a small player count, you get a little bit of a chance to get to know the other player a little bit more and explore each other's characters. Two players and the GM is fine with me. I don't know if Carl was a little bit worried about the numbers. He was trying to recruit more people, but I guess it makes it worthwhile. It's sort of when you're a GM, if you get quite a few players, it seems like really good use of your time, I reckon. And, you know, the more the merrier. Myself and Amy, I feel like we had a good game. We had plenty going on. We're bouncing ideas off of each other. Really enjoyable session. I mean, I love this system. And I said this to Carl at the time, I love the fact that every time Free League bring out a version of their Year Zero engine, or every iteration of it, is a little bit different, enough to make it interesting so it doesn't feel like you're playing the same game. And although it's the same core mechanism, there's no massive feeling for me that it's just changed for the sake of it, or that I'm really playing the same game. Every iteration has felt really quite different, but for someone who doesn't really like learning a whole new system from scratch, it's nice to have that familiarity with other versions that inform your understanding of a new version. Admittedly, sometimes that can work against you. You could kind of get confused about the differences, but so far I've not really found that, and I'm just really enjoying it. I think the one I'd like to play next, and now the completionist in me is starting to kick in, and I'm thinking, I'd quite like to play Vaesen, although from some quarters I've heard that that's a little bit lackluster. I know people would have played it and they're not totally convinced. At the same time, some people love it. I'd like to try Blade Runner. That's got a very narrow focus. I think you basically play the Blade Runner version of LA Cops. So it's got a tight focus in a fairly tight setting, and that might be quite interesting. I'd certainly like to play some more Walking Dead. Then there's Y2K. My only issue with that at the moment is it just feels, and I've mentioned this before, it does feel a little bit close to home. Where I live, Russia doesn't seem too far away. The trouble that we've got in the Ukraine, and in my role playing, I'd like to get a little bit further away from real life, especially when it's such a somber premise to that game. Carl did suggest that perhaps by playing a game set in America after a post-apocalyptic America, maybe that would alleviate that issue, and he could well be right there, in fact. So that's another one. I mean, the list goes on. What else? There's well, there's now the new Coriolis, and they've changed the setting, and it's more like these kind of, I've heard it described as sort of journey to the centre of the earth and 2,000 Leagues Under the Sea type of exploration. So this kind of sci-fi with a bit of a Victoriana. I don't know if that's a little bit, or dare I say, sort of steampunk. Probably not. That's probably not accurate. But, story of my life. And probably, listeners, you can sympathise this idea. There's so many games, so little time. And when you tap into a vein like this, like I say, that completionist in me kicks in, and I'm finding myself wanting to gather up these books and try the different iterations. As fast as I'm emptying my shelves, I'm going to be filling them up from the other end, it seems. I might have to confine my efforts to PDFs, but then, it's so beguiling. And in this podcast, I've talked a lot about D&D in the past, and then I talked about ICRPG for a good while, and Maze Rats. There's a certain similarity to those games, and it does make a change to talk about something a bit different. The Year Zero engine, it gets some criticism for how punishing it can be to actually roll a 6 on a D6. But so far, I've found that to be not too bad. I would say that Coriolis seems to be the most forgiving of the versions I've played, because instead, when you push a roll and you go for your second roll, they call it, I think it's invoking or call upon the icons, and instead of taking trauma when you fail, instead of taking trauma on your attributes, you contribute to a GM meta currency. I forget what it's called now. You don't really suffer. There's like a delayed suffering, and it's at the GM's discretion to use his currency, his meta currency as he sees fit. And that has made that different feel that you get between iterations. That is one of the aspects of Coriolis that changes to feel up. It is, you do feel a little bit. I felt my character was quite competent, really, whereas in other games, mind you, having said that, in Forbidden Lands my character felt quite competent, but he is a spellcaster and he was quite lucky. At any time, he was doing quite a lot of throwing magic around, and at any time that could have gone really badly. I feel that my luck was probably running out in that session, and it ended before I came unstuck. In fact, Carl actually mentioned that he'd played Coriolis with another group, and they'd been very reluctant to call upon the icons, fearing what the GM would do with his meta currency. But I was fine to push it, and I'm like that. I can be one of those players that tends to press the big red button. I like to see what's going to happen. I'm not overly cautious. Though, different strokes for different folks. Now, last month I put out a trial episode, and I called it was a new concept, a sort of short format podcast, and I called it Spiky Shorts. I still quite like the idea, but I haven't done a lot more else with it since that episode. Probably put another one out soon, or maybe I should say. But I like to work when inspiration strikes me, and I've been up to my eyes with assessments in the day job. Anyway, that's all done with now, and hopefully that'll free up a bit of space to chill out and think about my hobby a bit more. And thinking about the hobby, we've got some call-ins in response to that Spiky Shorts episode talking about mechanisms, and a rather kind call-in from Mirke the Meek, who has actually taken up a recommendation of mine to try out a game called Rose King, and I've even heard him talk about it on his podcast. So that was really nice to hear. Anyway, let's play the call-in and perhaps talk a bit more about it afterwards.
Hey Colin, this is Mirke the Meek. I picked up the Rose King. I don't know if you remember this, but you suggested a while ago, around the time I launched my Jaipur episode, you suggested it as another great 2-player game, and I would agree that it is. I had it on my wish list for a while, and it was on deep discount, so I bought it, and my sister came over this weekend, and we tried it out. We played twice, actually. Really fun, really engaging. Like the strategy. I like just about every aspect of it. It's very simple and can go fairly quick, easy to pick up. So, once again, thank you very much for the suggestion. I really appreciate that. Take care.
Now feeling flushed with success and a certain boldness and confidence flowing in my veins, I'm going to suggest another recommendation. Does confidence flow in your veins? I'm not sure it does. Well, that lasted a long while, that little bit of confidence. I'm doubting myself again. Yes, I digress. Kahuna. Kahuna is another Cosmos 2-player game from the Cosmos 2-player line. It's a little bit more challenging, I would say, than Rose King. Within a fairly limited number of plays for Rose King, I think you start to develop your own little personal strategies. And I've played Kahuna quite a few times, not as many as Rose King, and I'm yet to kind of suss it out. And I think that's part of its allure for me. It's the idea of the game is it's a territorial game, and you link different islands in this archipelago of islands, and depending on how many connections you have to the island, the person with the majority controls the island and places a coloured disc of their colour. So it's black and white pieces, and it's card play. You pick up cards, and that allows you to take actions, taking away a bridge or building a bridge or a link between islands. And you're kind of making this network. It's a little bit hard to explain, but it's a lovely looking little game. Nice quality wooden components. Quite intriguing. It's different to... I want to say it's different to anything else I've played. A friend of mine introduced it to me. He's kind of a bit of a family gamer. He doesn't play RPGs. Very smart guy, working in the field of AI. He's very good at collectible card games. Yeah, very, very sharp, clever fellow. And he put me onto this game. He absolutely rinsed me at it. But yeah, I enjoy playing it with my daughter. And it's quite a tough game against my daughter. And we never know who's going to win. I'm not sure how well it would go down with younger kids. Like I say, it's quite challenging, but who knows? They may still enjoy it. It's quite a nice tactile quality to the game. It's even at full price. It's not expensive and thoroughly enjoyable. Like I say, excellent components, really well produced, thoughtful, doesn't outstay its welcome in terms of playtime, unless you've got a really severe case of analysis paralysis. But although it's quite puzzly in a way, you're not placed with endless options that you've got to kind of consider. So yeah, Kahuna by Cosmos, another pick. And perhaps if you're listening, Mirke, one you might well enjoy. My next caller is calling in response to RPG mechanisms, their favourite mechanisms, and it is Anthony, aka the Runeslinger himself. Take it away, Anthony.
Hey, Colin. It's Anthony calling in from the Casting Shadows podcast, and for once, not calling in from the road. I've just listened to your Spiky Shorts episode and was compelled to call in. Of course, my first instinct was to wax poetic about BRP and Ubiquity and how they are those systems that just fit all of my preferences so perfectly. So there's so little friction, if no friction at all, in play. But I won't. Instead, very briefly, if possible, I want to talk about initiative. My preference for initiative is either to not have it, like to have it be static, or to have it be rolled once and not again unless something happens to change it. Coincidentally, that's how my favorite flavors of BRP and Ubiquity work. But we're not talking about those. Instead, what I wanted to talk about was an initiative system that really excited me and has continued to excite me for multiple years, and that's what's found in Fantasy Flight Games Star Wars, where the initiative is fluid. It's rolled at the beginning of an engagement, and those rolled successes for each side, or for however many sides that you have, are fixed and static. But the individual player isn't tied to any one of those initiative slots. They can be freely moved about. And I really, really enjoy this. I found it improved engagement. People are usually pretty interested in each other's play in my groups because we're all friends and we all really enjoy each other's characters. But still, there's that checking of the sheet to make sure that you're ready to go on your turn. This kind of disappears a little bit with this mechanism for play, meaning that people are curious who should go next, who can go next, what would work best next. And it's fluid, and it keeps us going through the entire engagement, whatever it might be, for as long as the initiative lasts, and encourages people to become even more familiar with each other's characters so they can figure out better ways to interact with one another to their own benefit and to the opponent's detriment. It's a mechanism I really, really like. And I'm not really one to port one mechanism from one game to another game, but the temptation is always there with this particular one. Anyway, thanks for the episode. Thanks for what you do, and take care.
So I want to say a big thanks to Anthony for this one, and it's exactly why I did Spiky Shorts. I wanted to inspire folk to call in and have a kind of like a focused topic and gather responses around that topic. Anthony's picked up the baton with a vengeance here. It feels like a bit of a mixed metaphor, but still, his vengeful baton is being wielded, and he's going first because he's got the initiative. Definitely got the initiative on this one, and I wholeheartedly agree. I'm going to link this slightly to this talk of the 4D role-playing experience, which, to be fair, I can't really judge because my understanding of it is I don't play like these guys that really appreciate this sort of this method of play, and I don't really think I want to. I could easily give it a go, or not easily, but perhaps if I ever had the chance to try it, perhaps I would like it. But my initial impression is I like the G in game, and I've talked about it before. I like my role playing. I like a bit of play acting and things like that, but I also like to get into the game and strategize and come out of character and talk with my players and the group. And I spoke about it when we was playing ICRPG, that sometimes we needed to resolve stuff in the game, and I'd really missed that. And this example of initiative that Anthony speaks of is a prime example of that. It's the real game aspect that, I don't know, it's like a challenge or a puzzle there to be solved. Figuring out the tactics, figuring out the strategy. Maybe it's a little bit of the war gamer and the board gamer coming out of me. Maybe it's something else. Maybe a little bit of a competitive spirit. Not too sure. And he mentions BRP. I enjoyed a play of Dragonbane because of elements like this. And my understanding, I'm not totally sure on the roots of this Swedish game, but I heard RuneQuest being mentioned. And if the common strand of DNA is RuneQuest, and is that not BRP? I think I'm right in saying that. Obviously, I'm not really familiar with RuneQuest. I have played it. I played it with Shandy Andy. I thoroughly enjoyed it. But yeah, Dragonbane, you have to make some real interesting decisions around the initiative, because my memory's a little bit sketchy on it, but pretty sure the initiative was fixed in slots in the same way that Anthony's describing, and you could, I can't remember if it was an action or how you did it, but you could switch with other players and use it to your strategic advantage. And in that game, you're quite limited with your action economy, because you can like move and you've got an action. Is that right? Or have you just got one action? Can't remember now, but I remember thinking that there was really, really tricky decisions, because one of the things you can do is you can defend, but if you defend, you don't get to attack. And I thought, when I read it, I thought, no, I don't know, that's a little bit of a departure from what I normally do. But in play, once again, and this is a common theme for me, reading a set of rules and playing a game, two very different things. And even if you think you're getting a good handle on a game, I would urge anyone, if they've got any interest in finding out what a game's like, there's no substitute for playing it. You can read it as much as you like, but I feel you're just in danger of missing out on some of the nuance. And I can't think of any examples off the top of my head now, but I'm sure I've read stuff that I thought was going to be great, and yeah, in play, not so much. But yeah, initiative, and I'll tell you what, initiative is one of them things that crops up a lot. It gets talked about a lot. There's loads of different ways of doing it, and it seems like it should be something really quite straightforward, and it can be, such as in ICRPG, where you just go round and round the table. But there's enough you could talk about that, and you know, that's interesting in its simplicity. We geek out about this stuff, and I believe it is because the devil is in the detail. And well, what's wrong with geeking out about the detail every now and then? And if we're going to mention geeks and geeking out, then we need to give a little bit of love to the nerds. We can't ignore the nerds, and we can't mention nerds without invoking Nerdmeister himself, former host of the Nerds RPG Variety Cast, Mr. Jason Connolly, supporting us as ever in our endeavours. I've got a call in from him talking about his favourite mechanisms. And I tell you what, folks, I'm not putting any money on him staying away from the mic for very long. He's teased the fact that he could be back, and well, I can wholeheartedly say I hope he is. June, he says, maybe June. I think he'll be lucky to take a month off. My money's on the fact that man can't stay away from the mic, and let's hope I'm right.
Hey Colin, Jason here. So, I don't know, there's so many good game mechanics out there, and it's hard to nail down just a couple, but I'll give you just a couple from primarily Barbarians of Lemuria. First are the way you do boons and flaws, which is the same way you do advantage and disadvantage in 5e. Advantage and disadvantage, of course, did not start with 5e. It existed before 5e ever was a twinkle in somebody's eye. But the idea of, you know, that simple roll 3 dice, take the highest 2, or roll 2 dice, take the highest 1, is such an easy mechanic and such an easy shorthand for you've got an advantage or a disadvantage, or something's a little bit harder or something's a little bit easier. And it really speeds up gameplay if used right. The other thing would be the careers in Barbarians of Lemuria. The idea that you have a certain skill, like I'm a sailor, and that applies to all those aspects. So just by virtue of being a sailor, you can navigate by the stars, you can swab the deck, you can drink heavily, anything a sailor can do, tie knots, then you can do. Now, I kind of like the way it's implemented in Rhesus better with cliches. The idea that you put that cliche, it works the exact same way, only instead of being a career like sailor, you can put down, a sailor in the Queen's Navy, in which case then you would also be able to speak proper Queen's English and know the military rank structure and, all that kind of thing, or best fighter pilot in the galaxy or whatever. So I kind of like the cliche a little bit better, but it's the same concept. The idea of that one overarching skill that covers a whole bunch of skills instead of having skill lists.
And as you'd expect from Jason, some great examples there. Also, as you'd expect from Jason, a mention of the barbarians of Lemuria and his old buddy the sailor, reading by the stars and cursing and swapping the decks. I love it when Jason uses that example. It's almost nostalgia for me at this point in time. Oh, especially with him shutting the doors on Nerds RPG. Temporarily. Let's hope temporarily. But I jest. I think the idea of cliches, I've never played Rhesus, but I think the idea of cliches, that does sound, I like the sound of that one. That does sound great. But of course, for me, out of Jason's fine selection, a hat trick, the advantage disadvantage mechanism, and I first encountered it in 5th edition, and I know it doesn't come from that one, but when I saw that, I think that was one of the things that really swayed me over into wanting to play again, strangely enough, and it was the purchase of the starter set. I've talked about it many a time, but it just seems so clever. Yeah, just pick up another dice, roll the both, and you're either taking the worst or you're taking the best. Things like that in games, well, they never fail to catch my attention, and the simplicity is so clever. And I know people that don't have their fans, are not fans. These ideas don't have their fans, and Hankering Furrenale was quite vocal about this in his ICRPG discussions, that he prefers the bonus. He hates rolling 2 dice and then having the disappointment of only one of them being one that applies. And I get that as well. But for elegance, if we want to use elegance as the word, and I think you definitely can have elegant design, and for me, advantage and disadvantage is difficult to beat. And that's about it. Big thanks to all the callers. Hopefully I'll get another episode of Spiky Shorts out there. I hope you've enjoyed it. I'm done. Where's my boy now? Sitting in the car park 6 hours a week. I don't know. I need to find something better to do in my time, I think. And that, as they say, is a wrap. Big thanks goes out to you, the listener, for taking a bit of time out of your day to listen to old Spike Pit. Take care, and I'll catch you later.